Hello.
Hola.
We're ready to go?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. So we're going to do a quick introduction first. My name is Othavia Lovelace, and I am the mechanic for Airship Ashanti, which is a multicultural steampunk group based in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have been an airship for about almost 7 years. It'll be 7 years this summer. I got into steampunk about 8 years ago, so I've been in steampunk a little bit longer than Airship Ashanti has existed, but I met the captain of Airship Ashanti at an event in 2014, and we just kind of clicked, and later that summer, everything came together, and it's been a wild ride ever since. What about you, Yasuke?
Well, yeah, my name is Yasuke Wolverhampton, and let's see, I am the Master of Spirits with Airship Ashanti. I got started, really right when Airship Ashanti had started, because one of was friends with the captain, Mandisa, and she basically just invited me over to a steampunk convention here in Cincinnati, and pretty much the rest is history there. I enjoyed my time there, and then when she was forming the airship, she's like, "Hey, you want to come join?" It's like, "Fine, I'll do it."
She had to twist your arm, right?
Oh yeah, really hard.
All right. So for those who don't know, we're going to talk a little bit about like what steampunk is and where it came from. I'm not sure how many people who are watching or who will watch this later know exactly what the genre is about. So go ahead and give a little explanation, Yasuke.
All right. Well, steampunk is a retro futuristic subgenre of science fiction that incorporates technology and aesthetic designs inspired by 19th century industrial steam-powered machinery. So, like, you want to, steampunk is mainly, shown from the lens of like Victorian England or the American Wild West. But like over the years, there's more countries and cultures have been incorporating their own flavors into steampunk.
Yeah, so the term actually was coined in the late 80s kind of as a tongue-in-cheek response to cyberpunk kind of taking over literature. So at the time, there were a couple of writers who were doing what would eventually be known as steampunk, and kind of a movement kind of sprung up around that. So while it started initially in literature, it's become more of a kind of, in addition, a visual aesthetic. So, and as well as kind of a version of cosplay, but not really, because you're creating your own characters rather than cosplaying already fully formed characters. And as Yasuke was saying, it's initially thought of as like American Wild West, 1800s, Victorian England, that whole period. But there are other people outside of those countries and continents making their own way, carving their own space in steampunk. And Airship Ashanti is a part of that because our backstory is based in West African history, like the Ashanti Empire of present day Ghana. So kind of with that in mind and thinking about anime shows and movies that you've seen before, what do you think qualifies as a steampunk anime?
Let's see, for me, well, as long as it has sort of the steampunk feel to it, then it pretty much qualifies. So it could be the clothing, the time history, what's called the time period where it takes place at, the technology that's being used, you know, this kind of brings me to when I was trying to make the list of the anime that I'm going to talk about, where trying to find something that is purely steampunk is actually very difficult. So you really want to, I had to basically dial things back and be like, okay, well, I need to look at the movie or the series as a whole to figure out, like, is this steampunk and how does it represent what steampunk is? So it's like, the way that so what I determine would be a steampunk anime is, could be different from what other people, feel, just depending on, what mindset they're coming from.
Right. Yeah. So for me, it also depends. It can be a couple of ways that I define it. What helps me is to kind of focus on the aesthetic. So visually, what are the characters in the show or movie? What are they wearing? What are they using as like modes of transportation? Also, for me, it's the time period as well. So it can be a little bit before the start of the 1800s and a little bit after, the end of the 1800s. But it really varies quite a bit. Like you said, there are some that I think are just kind of no-brainers, like the ones that have steam in the title. Like, there you go. Those are definitely gonna be steampunk. So one example would be like Steam Detectives. I think some of the Studio Ghibli movies qualify pretty heavily as steampunk. It depends. Some anime have steampunk elements, but they're not fully steampunk. And like you said, that can vary from person to person, and that's what makes it fun to debate. And that's what makes it interesting. So we have several. Oh, I'm sorry. There is a question down here. I'm new to the genre. Could I get like 3 fully steampunk anime that might be good to start with? So we're gonna go through some of the ones that we think qualify as like fully steampunk. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Yasuke, because I know that you are you like this particular movie very much.
Because really for the first recommendation, I just really wanted to start with really the most obvious one, which is it's called Steam Boy. It was made in 2004, and it was directed by this same guy that did Akira. If maybe some of you might have heard that little anime at some point.
Don't know. I don't think I ever watched that one.
but really, this one is just full, made with steampunk in mind. You got the clothing, you got the technology, everything is made, everything is operated, with steam. It takes place in London. This is really just the most steampunk you can really get. Heck, the main the main device that they're trying to, that I guess they're, the characters are fighting over is a steam ball, which is, basically this ball that has a bunch of compressed steam to operate machinery. Yeah, and if you are interested in watching it, you can find it on Amazon Prime if you have a subscription.
Is there a specific scene that you would say, like, if you were pointing someone to that movie, like, is there a specific scene or character that you think really represents the genre?
It's literally the whole thing. Like I mean, let's see, the main character is has this what's it called, like this monocycle thing.
Okay.
That
Very Victorian.
yeah. I mean, it's really about as steampunk as you can get. And I mean, really, this is, as far as like pure, like steampunk, made for steampunk, this was the only one that I was able to, really think of off the top of my head.
So my choice, which I recently started watching this and I really like the vibe of it, is Drifting Dragons, which is a Netflix show that came out 2016, 2017. And it's actually, I don't know if I would say it's like fully steampunk, because it has some fantasy elements in it too. So the story focuses on this crew that they're part of what's called a draking ship, which is basically an airship that flies around and hunts and kills dragons so that they can sell the meat and the organs and bones and the whole thing in different cities and towns that they come across. So it's a kind of weird mashup of steampunk and fantasy and like a cooking anime. There's one character who's very much into the basically teaching the audience how to like properly cook up a dragon. So if you replace dragon meat with like some other regular real meat that we have access to, you could probably make some decent recipes off of that. But I think that because it takes place on an airship and like life revolves around what's going on the airship, I think that at its core is what makes it a steampunk anime to me.
All right. Let's see. So the next one that I have on my list is Samurai 7. It came out in 2004. And you can watch it on Hulu or Amazon Prime. Let's see, I think with Amazon Prime you do have to like pay for it, but then Hulu is it comes with your subscription. Let's see, but yeah, Samurai 7 is it's a retelling of Seven Samurai. So if you are familiar with that story, then it's basically the same thing, but it takes place in like a steampunk slash cyberpunk environment. Because like the main, what makes me think of it as a steampunk anime is really the setting of the the main city that they're in, where let's see, it's not, it's not like, say, pure steampunk really in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's just the overall industrial type environment that's in it. There's a lot of there is some cyberpunk element in it with the like all the flying ships and robots and things like that. But I'll say overall it is pretty light, but it is pretty light on the details, but the steampunk details, but I think it's pretty good. So I guess One thing I kind of skipped over was, I guess, the overall story, which, yeah, basically you have this town that is, they're really hungry because every time every time harvesting season comes along, you have a bunch of bandits that come over and be like, hey, give us your crops. And they're like, we're tired of it. We need to hire samurai. And then, just kind of goes on from there.
You mentioned an interesting point about the time period. Like a lot of steampunk novels, some of these shows and movies that we're talking about, other kind of live action shows and movies focus on that industrial revolution aspect of the making that a part of the genre. So that kind of shows up in all of the gadgetry and the modes of transportation when you start to incorporate that into the narrative. Someone in the chat mentioned Cabinetry of the Iron Fortress, which is exactly what I am about to talk about, because when that came out, that was my stuff for like a year. I love that series. It's a really great series. So for those who don't know, it kind of focuses on these people who are surviving the world being overrun by these zombie-like creatures that can only be killed if by piercing the iron plate that covers their hearts. Like, so it's zombie-ish, but in regular zombie like lore, it's a headshot and they're done. This is, you got to get the heart or it's a no-go. So everything in that series is pretty much steampunk. They just added some zombies on top of it. You got the Japanese Industrial Revolution, you got steam guns, you got the steam powered trains, it's got everything in it. And you also get to kind of see the clothing from 19th century Japan, because for most of steampunk, it's very Eurocentric. So you end up having you have your top hats, you have corsets, you have double-breasted suits, you have goggles, things like that. If you're looking at it from kind of through a Victorian lens. I always tell people that the Victorian period was just a period of time that happened everywhere, but because, England was basically colonizing everything, they got to decide to call it the Victorian period after their queen. So they got to name it, but it was a period of time that everyone was experiencing. So it's interesting to me to be able to see what other countries and continents were doing during that same time period, outside of being colonized. But yeah, I love Cabinetry of the Iron Fortress. I definitely would consider that a fully steampunk anime to watch.
Yeah, that was actually one of those shows that was on my list for years, but then just kind of fell by the wayside because life.
Yeah.
So
the first season, I love the first season. They didn't do an official second season, but they did kind of continue the story, but I didn't like the continuation. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way about that, but yeah, that first season was pretty solid for me, and it wasn't too big of a cliffhanger that I felt let down that it wasn't being continued right where the story left off. Because some anime will just be yeah, we're just gonna leave you here. We're gonna leave you hanging, and we're never coming back. You're never getting a second season. We've got this giant cliffhanger at the end. Too bad for you. But this was okay. It was acceptable. So if I was gonna be left right there, I was okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are just, well, I guess most of the ones these days are like, well, we finished the anime series, so if you want to get more of the story, you better get these light novels.
Yeah. Yeah. Light novels.
Yeah.
Which are hit or miss, depending on what the story is. Can be a little bit like,
Yeah.
So what's next on your list?
So the next one is Lapida. So I took this time to watch some of the Ghibli movies that I've somehow missed out on, thanks to HBO Max. So you might also know this as Castle in the Sky. And let's see. So I guess the movie takes place in three different settings. You have one which is like on the ground, which is the more steampunk-esque type environment, because it's a mining town, kind of similar to some of the some of the areas that would need to mine for coal and things like that. The technology and all that stuff. The town actually is like on the side of a mountain, and all that stuff. And then you have just in the air, because there are a lot of airships, different types of flying machines. And then you have Lapita, which is actually based off of let's see, I don't know why it's it's based off of like one of the stories in Gulliver's Travels, I believe. I didn't get to that part. But so like there's some homages to that if you're familiar with Gulliver's Travels and you really enjoy it. So with this one, you have this girl who is on an airship, and the airship gets attacked by air pirates, who are after her. There's a necklace on. Yeah, she's wearing a necklace that is just highly sought after. At this point, we really don't know why or anything like that, but she's trying to run away, ends up falling off the airship, but the necklace that she's wearing actually saves her, so she just kind of floats down into the mining town where where a lot of the rest of the story takes place. And then just from there, it's really all about Sheeta learning sort of learning more about like herself and her family lineage and things like that. But there's also industrial revolution style trains and things like that. So there's like some steampunk stuff in it too.
So it's got a little bit of fantasy in it as well.
Oh yeah, it's like steampunk / fantasy all the way. But really that's really like a lot of Ghibli movies, because that's the same feeling I got from Howl's Moving Castle.
Right. Okay. So this is another one of my recommendations, and I know that people dislike this character. There are a lot of people that dislike this character, but I really love the movie more than I actually did the series, and that's Trigun Badlands Rumble. So in this movie, like Vash the Stampede is, he ends up in this city with a bunch of bounty hunters that are waiting for the arrival of the big bad, like the villain, who has this like long-standing beef with the city's mayor. So back in the day, like 20 years before, the city's mayor and his partner basically like double-crossed the villain, whose name is Gasback. So Gasback has been like on a tear, just destroying everything that belonged to the partner, and the partner who helped the mayor double cross him is running to him to his city to hide from Gasback. So Gasback's whole thing is revenge. He wants both of them to have nothing. He wants to kill both of them. So the mayor basically like hires all of these bounty hunters and puts this huge bounty on his head so that if he comes to town, the 200-300 something bounty hunters that are like in his city will eventually get him. So along the way, Vash meets this woman who's also a bounty hunter, apparently, at least that's what you think, who's going to the city to find Gasback, but she's got a whole different motivation for why she wants to find him. So as far as the time period goes, it's a little wobbly for me, but everything else about it is so steampunk that the time period just goes out of the window for me. Like all of the aesthetics are just great. So, you know, it gives kind of this Wild West feeling, like 1800s Wild West feeling. Everybody's around wearing cowboy hats and cowboy boots, and you know, the mode of transportation is a sand steamer. So it's like basically like a train, but without the tracks. And it's just kind of like running through the sand. And that's how they get from town to town, basically. So I know some people are annoyed by Vash. I think that you might be one of them. And Vash is he's very Vashy in this, like he always is. But the aesthetics are just like chef's kiss on this one. So if you are not a fan of Vash, I would still recommend that you give this one a try because it can be watched completely separate from the show.
Yeah, so like I mean, is it one of those cases where you can just watch it separately and, you know, really enjoy everything, or are there certain aspects of the movie that you might miss out on if you're not familiar with the show?
I think they do a pretty good job of explaining who Vash is without you having to go through the whole show and know all of that backstory. And a lot of it is focused on the girl that he meets on this sand steamer, and then starts kind of spending time with her throughout the story. It's kind of focused more on her. So, and her relationship to Gasback. I won't give away the ending if you plan on watching it, but I think that it can be watched separately, and you won't need to have a ton of backstory that would be explained in the show.
Okay, yeah. And
Do it.
hey, look, so for all of you out there who may be like, you know, how dare you not like Bash? Trust me, I tried multiple times. You know, once as a teenager and again as an adult to see if I thought anything different. And yeah, I tried.
Do it. Watch the movie. It'll be good. You'll like it.
It's like, I'll put that somewhere on my list.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat, and we're going to get into those because it takes us right into the next portion of this conversation. One is asking, what do we think about Full Metal Alchemist? Is it steampunk or isn't it? And then someone said that they read on a site that Harry Potter was considered steampunk. I've never heard that one before. So let's start with that one. Like, do you remember what they said about how Harry Potter was steampunk, because I don't see it. Like I don't see it at all.
It may be, based off of the overall setting, so not necessarily have, it doesn't necessarily have the steampunk elements in it, but I mean, it does have, the old timey England type feel to it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I don't see, typically when I'm looking for something that's like, that would qualify as something that's steampunk, there are specific aesthetics that I'm like looking for. And when I look at Harry Potter, I'm mostly seeing magic. So we can go through like what some movies, some anime shows and movies, like, are they steampunk anime or are they just shows and movies that have steampunk elements to them? And actually, one of those for me is Full Metal Alchemist. So the person who asked about Full Metal Alchemist, I know that shows up on a lot of steampunk anime lists, but I think it's only because of the time period. The parts of it that I think that would qualify as like steampunk aren't really based on the technology. It's so Ed's arm and his leg in a different setting, maybe that could be steampunk. As to how he got them, maybe that could be steampunk. But because of his, because of him using the power of transmutation, using magic in order and getting those, because he did that, I think that is what disqualifies it for me. On the surface, if you're just looking at it, him standing next to his brother in this suit of armor, I mean, it looks pretty steampunk. But once you get a little bit more into the story and as to how his brother got in the suit of armor and how he got the leg and the arm, I don't know. Winry is probably the most steampunk thing in the show. As the the auto mail specialist, yeah, she's probably the most steampunk thing in the show.
Yeah, like one of the things I noticed from some of these lists that I was looking at was that they, they'll say like a certain show or movie is like it's considered steampunk, but there's some of them where it's like, well, just like with Full Metal Alchemist is just, oh, it takes place in this time period, but
right.
But there's a lot of these aspects, other aspects that kind of disqualify it. But there's some which actually is part of what we'll get into a little later, where people see aspects of what would be in a steampunk anime or a steampunk movie or whatever, but it's actually not really steampunk. It would be something like a diesel punk or maybe a cyberpunk or something like that.
Which leads to the anime that you put on that list, right? Of not quite steampunk, it's something else.
Mm-hmm.
But people always say it's steampunk.
Well, it was only on just one of the lists I was looking at, which is Metropolis. Came out in 2001. And with that one, they said it was a steampunk anime, but it's actually more of a like a diesel punk or a diesel punk / cyberpunk, because they have it's a city that has a bunch of robots that are doing they're doing a lot of the jobs that the humans could do, I guess just less efficiently. So the humans are out of a job, and they're not too happy about the robots existing. And just to kind of dive into that a little bit further, going back to how what I think qualifies in anime as steampunk. Uh, it has to have that feeling of between it was like the 1860s to the early 1900s, what 1910, 1920, something like that.
Yeah,
With
when you get too far into that century, you're pushing up, and we should explain like you start to push up onto diesel punk. So diesel punk is what, if you're looking at time periods, it's what comes right after the time period that is considered steampunk. So it's a little bit more so basically kind of interwar period. You're talking about World War I, World War II through like the 1950s. There may be airships, but those airships take on a more like a sharper kind of militaristic look. You're talking about, if you're talking about the 1920s, like late 1910s, 1920s, you're looking at a lot of like Art Deco kind of buildings and features of that nature. So, think Great Gatsby meets World War II. Like Great Gatsby meets Captain America, the first Avenger. Kind of that. You're looking at that type of aesthetic.
Yeah, and that was the feeling, that was the sentiment I got from watching Metropolis, because let's see, it's the I guess the way that the people dress and everything, it's more like the 1920s, but there's
Yeah.
some aspects which kind of bleed into the 50s, which especially the vehicle designs.
Yeah. When I initially saw that on a list, I was like, oh, I don't know about that one. I don't really see it as steampunk, maybe, but the more when I watched it, it was like some of this is actually like pushing into cyberpunk. When you start talking about some of those scenes are pretty kind of gritty. You start talking about like all of these robots. Some of it reminded me like of Blade Runner. Like it had a kind of Blade Runner tinge to it for me. So yeah, I don't know, when people come up with those lists, like I don't know what they're seeing that makes them kind of automatically say, oh, this is steampunk. And maybe because we've been in steampunk for so long now, it's easier to kind of see the kind of the breaks in time periods to say, yeah, this is definitely fully steampunk, and this is kind of a mixture, and this is not.
Yeah, I think it's more like, well, this show has airships, and steampunk has airships, so it's
That
steampunk.
might be it.
But then airships do exist in like in diesel punk as well.
Right.
It's just they're powered differently. So instead of being powered by steam and having like a sort of a haphazardly arranged, like I guess
The
engine or
design.
whatever. Yeah, design things. It's sleeker, more metallic. It's run by by fuel, diesel, gas. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe sometimes it is. I see an airship, and so that makes it steampunk. But those can exist in both of those genres. It looks different for each of them. So I know you wanted to talk about Last Exile, right? Because Last Exile falls into that area of like, is it steampunk? Is it diesel punk? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I got more of, I mean, just like, well, I mean, not like just like with Metropolis, but when I was watching it, I did get more of a diesel punk feel to it. I mean, there are there's a lot of airships, you know, air battles and all that stuff. But you know, when I was watching it, you know, it kind of had more of a World War II feel to it. You know, but one thing I should, I guess a caveat I need to add to it is I've only seen the first couple of episodes for it, so maybe something might change in the future. But you know, I have a feeling if it were to do that, then it would just be a huge change in the setting, and that just wouldn't make sense.
Someone in the chat is asking, do we consider Avatar: The Last Airbender steampunk?
Let's see. So have you seen this one?
Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, but first of all, by the way, awesome series. Love it.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. So for let's see, for The Last Airbender, I don't really get, you know, that feel for it. You know, since yeah, I I don't know, because it has more of like a, you know, like I guess a more, I guess, ancient Asia feel to it. But with Legend of Korra, they did actually model it somewhat after you. Well, they pulled from like New York City and, you know, Shanghai, and then, you know, made it all 20s looking. You know, and
And
I'm
even
oh, go
that to
ahead.
me is kind of leans, if you're talking about Legend of Korra, it leans a little bit more diesel punk. Like
Yeah, it
some of
does.
the design of it leans a little bit more diesel punk than steampunk to me.
Yeah, it does.
So the answer to that question is no.
We have to be all long-winded about it.
So when I first started, this is one that is a definite no for me. But when it first came out, it was kind of like, where are they going with this? It doesn't really have the time period is off, but some of the gear in it, I was kind of like, oh, are we going steampunk? What are we doing? And that's Attack on Titan. Like I was initially like, because of the omnidirectional mobility gear, I was like, maybe, but it's actually gas powered and not steam powered. So that pretty quickly crossed it off of my list and put it in the definite it's a no for me dog category.
Yeah, but also if you're currently watching the the last season, I'm not giving any spoilers at all. When you watch
I would say spoiler alert if you're going to give a spoiler.
Oh no, I'm not giving any spoilers at all. But basically, when you watch the last season, it is definitely not steampunk at all. I mean, just the I don't know, the imagery of it, the iconography of it, it's just not steampunk at all.
I'm tired of Attack on Titan playing with my feelings, so I am waiting as long as possible so that I can binge everything and not like, you know, get left, because they like to be gone for like 5 years and you never, you don't know they're gonna come back. So I'm bad with anime like that, where I will hold off on watching. Like I will watch up until like the last 2 episodes of that season until I find out if it's getting another season, and then I'll be like, okay, now I can continue.
Yeah, well, I'm one of those people that has to know, also like because of how popular the series is, and then especially because of the delay for the the current episode from last week. I need to make sure I stay up to date so I don't get spoiled or anything.
See, yeah, I don't know. I pretty much stay away from I've been lucky not to get spoiled on a lot of stuff, and I should knock on wood, or from Michael, whatever this is. I should not. I should say that and then cross my fingers that I don't get spoiled. But I'm pretty good at not hearing what's happened. So my timelines on all of my accounts to block out certain, like, okay, I'm gonna put Attack on Titan on the mute list. Like, don't tell me what's going on. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, interesting. Never thought about doing that.
I think that's, yeah, I don't, did anyone else have any other questions? Any other questions in the chat?
Well, actually, while the questions are coming in, I do have one sort of, I guess, overall statement to make, though. So one, well, for those of you who might be interested in, steampunk, whether it's watching material or even if you want to get into it and you wear the costumes and things, one thing that, hopefully you got from this panel is that, there isn't a, like one way to do steampunk. So if you look at people who are wearing, the petticoats, the vests, the corsets, and they're drinking tea and all that and speaking in British accents or whatever it is. If you see that and you get kind of like, you want to back off from it because it just seems pretty intimidating, you really don't have to worry about that because steampunk is pretty much what you make it. It is it's the science fiction fantasy setting, fantasy genre, so you can really do what you want with it. We have several costumes of where we add steampunk elements to it, like Pokemon, for example.
Steampunk Pokemon, yes. We're a cosplay. We are a kind of cosplay based group. I know for me personally, I started doing steampunk before getting into like full on cosplay, what you would consider cosplay, as in dressing up like already established characters. So I already had a character and a backstory for my steampunk character. And then I got involved with Airship Ashanti. Yasuke, Mandisa, especially interested in anime and doing anime cosplay. And we kind of decided to meld the two. So we do a lot of mashups. So you'll see us do, if you go to our Facebook cosplay page, you'll see a lot of photos that are mashups of anime shows and steampunk, or we did Steampunk Steven Universe. We've done Cyberpunk Rainbow Bright. What else is another big one that we've done? We do like 6 to 7 different costumes a year. We go to conventions all the time. Each person in our group, there are 5 of us, gets to pick a costume that we will do as a group cosplay for the year. We have people like Yasuke, who always likes to go to OhioCon up in Columbus. So we always do a cosplay for that. We have one of our members who is our ship's doctor, who loves to go to horror conventions. So we always end up doing some kind of horror related costume for that. So it can be a really interesting mix when it comes to costuming. Sometimes we just do straight steampunk costumes, and sometimes we do steampunk superheroes. I have a Victorian Luke Cage. We also will go to a local steampunk convention where we're following whatever the theme is. So one year it was Steamtastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. So it was a kind of Harry Potter universe, Fantastic Beasts related costume. This year, the theme is the Weird West. And hopefully we'll be going to that because we are doing a Western Marvel cosplay for that. Yasuke is going to be Cowboy T'Challa. I will be a mashup of Wolverine and Mae West. We've got a Saloon Girl Storm. So, you know, it's just a really good time. It's a really great way to just to have some fun, add a little bit of whimsy to your life. I know I am in my 40s, and this is probably the most fun that I've had since I was a kid. I was telling somebody that before we got on here, like it has taken me back to being a kid again. I just have more money to spend now than I did when I was young.
Let's see. So we actually have one more question that came in.
Why do you think there's not as much steampunk anime? I would say that these series are like, I don't know. I think steampunk it can be a hard genre to kind of get right on screen. If you're like us and you have very specific like things that you're focusing on that you think are steampunk. Because what we do when we do costumes is completely different from what we do, you know, if we're like watching an anime and it happens to have some steampunk elements. It's like this has steampunk elements, but it's not fully steampunk. Like I would say, is it Levius, that boxing anime? There are lots of steampunk elements in that, but I wouldn't call that an actual steampunk anime. So I don't know. I feel like, especially if you're thinking about anime, like there's usually like a larger story that whoever the creator is trying to tell. And I don't know if that necessarily fits with steampunk all the time.
Well, I mean, really, steampunk, while you're seeing it in more and more places, it's still not it's still a very niche genre.
True.
So you're not really going to get a lot of steampunk anime because, you know, that's just not the aesthetic that, you know, people are, you know, really going for.
Not enough people.
Right. People. You know, and, you know, I guess like with Steam Boy, for example, let's see. I mean, it came out in 2004. Nobody really knew what steampunk was. And, you know, but despite it being made by the guy who has, you know, the huge pedigree of making literally the most popular anime of all time.
Right.
But even that didn't catch on. I've heard conversations like long before I've gotten into steampunk where, you know, people just didn't care for the aesthetic of it. Maybe they're just thinking of, I guess just the whole thing of like gears and steam and England and all that stuff is like weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that movie coming out in 2004 is like, in 2004, I would say that steampunk was still like primarily a literary subgenre. Like it wasn't all over the place like it is today. Like for a period of time, there were episodes on TV shows about steampunk. Like, oh gosh. Like I think Psych had an episode about kind of like trying to solve a murder at some steampunk convention. It was elements of steampunk were showing up in videos. Like Nicki Minaj and I forget that guy's name. He's a DJ. But Justin Bieber had like a steampunk themed video. It was kind of showing up all over the place. So yeah, I just think that steampunk is not, it's not popular enough with enough people for it to become like a big deal outside of these kind of niche spaces. So we are out of time. I just want to let everyone know that if you're looking to follow us, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Airship Ashanti. You can also find our cosplay page on Facebook. Just search Airship Ashanti. So hope everyone had a good time.
Yep. And if you want to follow, what we do, or I guess if you want to get like some, information about, I guess, what we do and what we're about, come to the Airship Ashanti community page and take a look at that. And that's also on Facebook.
All right, we are out of time. Signing off.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone.